Okay, here's our video today when life first saw the Earth. So, if we go back 4.6 billion years ago, right? The Earth was formed about 4.6 billion years ago, give or take, after the Sun, after Jupiter. So, when it first formed, when it was forming, after it was being bombarded by gas and dust, gravity was taking over. Of course, it didn't form in a day, right? It wasn't like a Wednesday. It took a million years or so or more for the Earth to form. But when it did form, there was no life. There was absolutely no life on the planet. It would take a billion years after it formed for life to appear. And that life, that early life, couldn't see the world like we can. So if we go back 4.6 billion years ago, if we even go back 3.6 billion years ago, when that first life was forming, see, the Earth was being bombarded by asteroids and comets. Of course, we needed this bombardment because those comets and those asteroids, they were carrying a very precious cargo. Get our pen ready here. Without this, there would be no life, and again, there would be no eyes. And of course, the comets were carrying H2O, two hydrogen, one oxygen. We know this is as water, H2O, or more sophisticated name, dihydrogen, because there's two hydrogen, dihydrogen monoxide. And so those comets bombarded Earth billions of years ago, giving us the water that we need. So the first life would form about 3.5 to 3 billion years ago. And of course, this is the archaea and bacteria. But they had no eyes. But eventually, though, they would form something called an eye spot, which was more like a light sensitive device capable of detecting life. Show a picture of that. And here's the early bacteria, archaea. So right over here, make sure my pen's ready. There's the eye spot. And again, it's not an eye as we're thinking an eye is, but it's more like a light sensing device. And these early bacteria and archaea would have, well, actually, these are protists, actually, what you're seeing here, because you see that it has a nucleus. So these are eukaryotic cells, and they would have had an eye spot. Bacteria and archaea, they don't have a nucleus, they're prokaryotic. And of course, we're eukaryotic also because we have a nucleus in all our 30 trillion cells. And this is a chart so we can look at when life that had eyes, the eyes that we could, camera type eyes like we have, that could finally see the world, would happen within the Cambrian period. And let me just give a little right over here. You can see it in the Paleozoic era, before the dinosaurs, and you can see the time frame over here. So we're looking at the first animals that can see the world, not just light, would be 530 million years ago, give or take. Again, during the Cambrian explosion, where there was an explosion of life. But these animals, they would have been marine anthropods, so they would have been strictly in the ocean. If we want to get a little frame of reference here, this is the Cretaceous period of the dinosaurs, the famous dinosaur, the T-Rex, in the Cretaceous period, and the Triceratops. I'm sure those are the two famous ones. And of course, though they were in the Jurassic Park movie, well, I'm not sure if Triceratops was, but T-Rex actually doesn't belong in the Jurassic period or the Cretaceous period. And of course, we live in the Holocene epoch way up there. So these marine anthropods, well, let's write it down, marine anthropods that would have seen the world, and here's one that had 5 eyes. I'm going to use green, right? And this is Opabinia. So Opabinia, that is. You can see it has the 5 eyes. Let's get a better Opabinia. There we go, Opabinia. Now, Opabinia had the 5 eyes, and it was one of the first organisms, a marine anthropod, that would be able to see the world. But the one that's probably more famous is a trilobite. Trilobite. I'll show a picture of the trilobite. And here's a trilobite. So again, we have the Opabinia with the 5 eyes and the trilobite. And this trilobite kind of looked like a horseshoe crab in a way. Talking again, 530 million years ago, give or take. They kind of look like those roly-poly insects that you would have seen, or those pill bugs. Let's get a picture of that. There's the pill bug, roly-poly. Kind of looks like a trilobite. So we did have the trilobites and the Opabinia as one of the first organisms, as so far as we know, these marine arthropods that did have eyes. They had these camera type eyes like we have. Ours are more sophisticated than theirs, and they were able to see their world. But the first ones to venture on land, the ones we can see on land that had eyes, well, that's something different. Let me give you a picture of that. And that's the Tiktaalik. So here's the Tiktaalik. I'll write it down for you. Make sure I have a. And this organism would live about 360 million years ago, and eventually it's a transitional fossil. As you can see, it's a fish-like animal. It does have eyes, and it has kind of like, as arms, and so it was able to venture on the land for a short duration. Again, Tiktaalik, which is an Inuit word, by the way, Tiktaalik. And again, we're looking at 360 million years ago. And the world they would have seen is a very marshy land, very humid land, with oxygen levels much greater than we have today. We have like 21% oxygen levels in their atmosphere. They could have had anywhere between 30% oxygen levels in the air. Very hot, yet very humid. There were no flowers. There were these fern-like trees. But there were insects, though, which gives up an interesting point, too, because insects do have compound eyes, but they had primitive compound eyes like dragonflies. So they would have been able to see the world, too, but a very, very different way than the Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik would have more of a camera-type eye that could focus its light and see better than the compound eye insects. So again, you can argue what were the first animals to see the world. Maybe we can look at insects were the first, like the dragonflies, or the one with the camera type eye that can see the eye clearer would have been Tiktaalik. And let's get the chart. So in the Mississippian period, right over here, again in the Paleozoic era before the dinosaurs, in this roughly range over here, we have Tiktaalik, again, 360 million years ago. When it did venture on land, by the way, like I said before, it did have insects already there, these primitive dragonflies that would have come in the Devonian period over here. All right, so the eyes have it.